podcast. Hell yeah, brother. Overload, brother. Beats by @Smoke M2D6.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Seattle Overload. We've had a brief hiatus and we're back to talk about the defense. We did this for the offense where we sort of gave our way too early overall analysis of overview, if you like, of where the offense sat. And now we're talking about the defense, the best side of the ball. This episode is brought to you by Ryan Davis. Griffin, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing? A little delayed reaction.
We
Matty,
should mix
I've
that
been
up more.
meaning to say this, and I'm gonna forget. I've been watching Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Ewan McGregor, when he smiles, I'm looking at Matty, and it's not just because you guys are the same. Well, isn't he Scottish? Or is he
Yeah, I think
English?
he's Scottish.
Oh shit.
He
Anyway,
is Scottish,
you and
yeah.
Ewan McGregor have the slightest likeness, especially when smiling. Anyway,
I'll
not-
take that.
Matty, say
Ewan's a good-looking
Matty-
guy, so sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Matty, say hello there for us. Just give us
Hello
a
there.
hello
But
there.
that's not going to sound like Ewan McGregor
Hello
because
there.
as established,
but-
he is Scottish.
But when you look at the mouth, though, it's basically like Ewan is here with us right now.
the mouth, yeah.
Okay, Matty, I have another thing. Okay, real quick before we
ask
get
how
into
Ty
it.
is, yeah.
Yeah. But Ty's fine. Whatever. No.
Yeah, I'm great. I'm chilling.
So, Matty, you watched The Boys, right?
Yeah, big fan of that.
Okay. So Carl
Yeah.
Urban, being Australian or New Zealand or Kiwi, I probably just pissed off millions of people.
Well,
in
you
the
did it
Down
with
Under
Scottish
right
and
now.
English people, so I'm sure.
Sure.
You know, let's just
Yeah.
go all in.
Yeah,
Do
so,
every
but-
continent, you know.
So, but as Billy Butcher, he's doing a English accent. So I was wondering, but it sounds like to me, who people on our side of the pond have a terrible ear for these things compared to people on your side of it. Is he like slipping in and out of an English accent to do, because like, is he just not doing a good job of it, or?
Wait,
'cause-
you actually think he sounds English?
Well, that's what I'm wondering, because he sounds kind of like
Ooh.
Carl Urban doing like Amir a little bit, but just
To
like,
me,
more
it just
rough and
sounds like a
tumble.
really, really weird. Like I think he is from New Zealand, right? But to me,
Yeah.
it just sounds like a really messed up Australian accent. And
Interesting.
I know the difference between that and New Zealand, right?
Right.
But to me, because it's so at first it kind of annoyed me because I realized he was trying to do an English accent. But now the more I watch, the more it doesn't sound like that at all.
He's just kind of doing some weird.
He's just
the
himself. He's
Americans
Billy
will eat
Butcher,
this up.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, Americans love it, and we don't know anything. So it's.
No,
like,
I'm
doesn't
shocked
matter.
you guys actually think that's an English accent.
Well, that's why I was wondering. At least
Honestly,
know
I
enough
thought
to-
he was doing like an Australian accent or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, Ty, you're not technically American, are you?
yeah. Ty's
No, I am.
slightly less.
I'm an American citizen. I'm an American citizen.
But
Are you
you've,
sure?
you've spent enough time in Canada to be slightly less ignorant than I am.
Yeah.
True.
About
True.
international.
Yeah, it's been a good 4 years. I've kind of I've cleansed myself of the
Sure.
American
Maple syrup just yourself.
Sure.
Yeah, it's coursing through my veins.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay,
To
so
answer your
Ty,
question,
how are
though,
you?
I am
Yeah.
great.
Ty's great.
I am doing great. It's nice to see my friends again. It's been a while. Apologies to our dear listeners for the delay. We've tried to schedule this for the last couple of weeks, and it's like either I have a scheduling conflict, or Griff has a scheduling conflict, or Matty has a scheduling conflict. But we are finally here. We're finally together, and we are absolutely vibing. And I need to watch more of The Boys. Is season 3 good? Because I haven't started it yet.
It's very good. It's very
Pretty
good.
good. I'm enjoying it more than I did in season 2, I think, so far.
Yeah, I think that's probably the next thing that I'm gonna start watching.
And the
Yeah.
best bit at this point is I'm not sure what direction they're going to take it.
To be clear, we are not sponsored by Amazon Prime Video, but if anyone working in Amazon headquarters,
We are
is
open.
No.
Yeah,
Nice.
we are open.
So, the state of the 22 Seahawks defense. If we start with the pass rush, which was the big need, once more, it feels like every offseason it's that case, but the edge rush in particular was identified by defensive coordinator Clint Hurtt as being the major thing that Seattle had to acquire. Now, they did acquire some edge rush, both through the draft, Boye Mafe, and free agency, spending the most money they've ever spent on an outside free agent, which doesn't really say much, but it was still not an insignificant total for Shenna and Rusu, right? Griffin, how are you feeling about the edge rush? Because
I think that they have the most talent going into camp or this, the start of the regular season than they have probably since I don't know, 2018. 2018 you had Clark and Jacob Martin. And I mean, Martin wasn't really a known quantity yet, but like he proved to be a viable.
turned out that way, yeah.
So I feel like we can go into this season saying they have a better floor than at least 19 and 20. Obviously 20 they had necessitated a midseason trade for a veteran who was past his prime but still good in Carlos Dunlap. So it's I don't know, that's a good starting point, and it's not just, and they're young too, is the other thing. So Uchenna Nwosu is a legit edge rusher, kind of like quality edge 2 material, can be the second best edge rusher on a decent pass rush. Darrell Taylor obviously has the makeup for a number 1 guy. He still has to get to that level, but like everyone saw the sparks there. Like the talent is certainly undeniable. He just continues to need reps, etc. I said this before. What's really cool about Nwosu is that while he said in the press conference, he said he prefers the left side. He, on tape, to me anyway, it seems like he's equally good off right or left. And Taylor is still good off right, but Taylor said himself he also prefers left. And Nwosu being able to play a lot of the right side, that means more snaps for Taylor on the left side when they come out with their 4-down wide edge rushes. So that's a good sign. And then the depth too; those are real X factors, because you have your floor established with Nwosu and Taylor. But then what can really swing it toward the positive is if Boye Mafe has a awesome rookie season, or can just provide any sort of life. And Clint Hurt reportedly really wanted him in the draft. Also, I'll pass this nugget along. I heard, as the saying goes, from somebody that Clint Hurt actually preferred Mafe over the other options available in that general vicinity. Ebiketie, and Drake Jackson, pinning that together. So that's a interesting, even though I think we preferred Ebiketie in a perfect world, but that's interesting. Note.
So with Mafe, how similar is Mafe to Nwosu in that they're both Mafe's a complete, not complete different, but he's a higher level of athlete. But in terms of their rush plans, right, are they going to win in similar ways? Because why I say that, and Nwosu's not the most bendy type, right? And Mafe ain't the most bendy type either. Do you see what I'm saying there?
Yeah. Well, I want to amend something. When I said I heard, I meant to say we heard, because that was a we thing there. So I'm not trying to paint that off like a.
No, you heard it. You heard it.
Okay. All right. Great. But so what was your question about who's more bendy between the two? Sorry.
Yes. No. Are they similar in the fact that they're not necessarily the most bendy types, but they're like athletic, they can drop some, they're kind of scrappy?
I think so. And most of it to me is like the classic, 250 something edge, kind of hits all the notes. He is bendy, but he's not. It's like it's good bend, not great bend. He's got good get off, not great get off. He has good arc speed, not great arc speed. He has good hands, not great hands. That's why he's like what I said earlier, an edge 2, not an edge 1.
Yes.
He can get you 5 to 7 sacks with pretty good pressure, especially in like drop back situations where he knows he can just tee off the line. So he's really just like a classically stylized edge, just with all of the sliders, toned down a little bit. Like that's what he is to me. Mafe is weird in that he is like egregiously slanted towards certain things, and then others it's just like looks a little clunky. I mean, like athletically, Pete Carroll compared him to Cliff Averill, which is weird to me because Cliff Averill can, run a curved trajectory and it just looks so smooth and natural. Whereas with Mafe, to change direction, it's like I've said this phrase before. He has like distinct phases, like starting, okay, then stopping, and then starting again. And in order for him to keep his speed, he has to fly off the ball and really time his jump up. But what's still exciting is the get off is still great. He's still really explosive in a straight line. He's powerful with his hands, or at least can be. So it's just a matter of like getting to the right spots. But
well, and on the
it's
subject of
different.
get off with him, like, you know, we all saw the false steps on his tape and the kind of
Right.
weird clunkiness, even from off the snap stuff. So if they can clean that up, then there's the thinking, you know, well, hang on a second. Now we've sort of given him a much more consistent, faster get off.
Yeah.
Now we're sort of unlocking a few more options there in his rush.
So it'll all follow from can he get his get off right, because it's not like Taylor had some get off issues too, just like being snap timing problems in college. But even when he gets off the line, even if he doesn't fire off immediately, he's so naturally bendy. He doesn't have to put effort into getting his hips and toes pointed toward the quarterback as he progressively gains depth down the pocket. Like, he's just natural to him, similar to Averill. I mean, if you're going to make an Averill comparison with someone on the team, I would think Taylor. Obviously, Pete's probably just saying whatever in a press conference and is just thinking in terms of like the rawest of traits. I mean, Maffei is incredibly explosive and he can convert awesome speed to power. And like Averill could, you know, he was crazy get off. He ran like a 1.5 10-yard split, and his speed to power was even better than maybe Chris Clemens, who was a great, you know, classic Leo who could convert speed to power. So in Seattle. So yeah, whatever. But yeah, Maffei is exciting. He is really the X factor. But Seattle has a good floor to start with, and a floor that they can like bank on. It's not like, you know, if they had Carlos Dunlap still, and they didn't cut him, and they talked about even maybe bringing it back. But if it was Taylor and Dunlap again, we'd be thinking, well, is Dunlap going to have a slow start to the season? Is he going to need, you know, are they going to have to accommodate him more with the fronts and stuff? Are they going to have to, you know, find ways to, like, it's not too hard to figure out. But with Nwosu, it's just, he fits in perfectly. It's like Tetris. Like, it's just, you don't need to think twice about it. He fits into every front that they're going to run. And his versatility makes him and Taylor, schematically anyway, interchangeable. So the floor is way higher, and then the ceiling will be defined by what we get from Maffei and Tyreek Smith.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, because like that's pretty much how I see it. Is like they didn't necessarily raise their ceiling a ton for this season in particular, but they did raise their floor where it's like, all right, you have some guys that you can at least count on. They're going to give you, you know, a few pressures a game, and you should be able to bank that. You know, and Taylor's probably the only guy in this group right now that has like big numbers in his bag, or that he could pull from. That, you know, because Nwosu, for the reasons that you mentioned, kind of limited. You know, I don't think he's going to post like massive numbers that everyone's going to, you know, freak out about. But I think you're just going to get more solid production throughout the season, more consistent production, which is kind of, I mean, that's kind of what that old Seahawks group from, you know, the early 2010s kind of did. You know, there wasn't really one guy that was putting up a ton of crazy ass numbers. It was just a bunch of guys really coming together and producing consistently, and they had a really nice rotation. I think with the names that they have right now, they're going to be able to build a really nice rotation for this season, and just get better overall production out of their guys, and just more production that they can just count on, rather than, you know, a bunch of guys that might just boom or bust on a weekly basis.
What I'd say about the Maffei comments from Pete that Griffin spoke about is, you know, on that Tyler Lockett mic'd up video, you can see the intensity which they are practicing with on some of those clips, and that the O-line and D-line aren't really doing anything. They're sort of just acting around, playing at like a quarter speed, and they're not really in pads. And so the whole phases of the rush and the distinct like stop and start nature of Maffei through the arc, that will only really show up when it's full speed practice. So for now, the Pete Averill comp is more, I think, as Griffin alluded to again, like the Averill element is that he's so supremely athletic. In fact, tested more athletic than Cliff Averill. Now, the thing for me, if we blend this towards scheme, is that one, all of the Fangio tree talk about how important having edge players is in a 3-4 system. Seattle has, and the reason being, they have to set strong edges, but they also have to be versatile to walk out and cover down on slot receivers at times, and they have to be able to drop a bit, right? Now, and they have to set an edge, because if in especially in like too high, they have to buy time to force an alley for the safeties to or a safety to come down into the fit, right? Now, Seattle last year, I think it gets underplayed how many eggs they put in the Alden Smith basket, because if they had Alden Smith and they'd had Darrell Taylor and they'd had Benson Mayowa, that is 3 like legit kind of 3-4 outside linebacker types. Mayowa always gets typecast as that classic 4-3 end, but he starts his career as a Sam in Seattle, so that's an on-the-ball linebacker, rush linebacker, just like a Bruce Irvin, right? Just not as athletic. So they had 3 dudes, but the problem with Smith going was that then the alternative of Alton Robinson wasn't ready for that. Mayowa was just who you knew he was. He wasn't that guy. And so Carlos Dunlap had to play more in the kind of base downs, where they're in the more 3-4 looks, the bear looks, right? And then everyone's like, why is he dropping? Now, as Griffin's highlighted, he did real good work. The defense performed better than you'd expect when they dropped defensive linemen, right? But in a 3-4, those edges do have to drop. But they needed Dunlap's rush on every down, not just like the nickel downs, the 4-down stuff Griffin mentioned earlier, where when Seattle goes into nickel and in all likelihood takes Al Woods off the field for a 5th defensive back, right? And they move both their outside linebackers to the defensive end spots, and they're in like a 4-3 or 4-2 presentation, depending on what coverage they're going to be running. When that happens, right, then that's when Dunlap was expected to play last year. Now this year, Dunlap could return just for that role. Probably unlikely. Probably gets paid more elsewhere, and also has spoke about the importance of rhythm to him as a rusher and having more playing time. But from where the Seahawks are now, that with the edge group, they've got guys who can all contribute on every single down. There isn't a clear leader aside from Taylor, so there's like a nice sort of young competition element, and it just fits the scheme.
Right. And back to the comment where, they actually weren't statistically hurting when dropping Carlos Dunlap, as counterintuitive as that sounds, because Dunlap's skill set is what it is. The scenarios where he was dropped are like as low stress as possible. And the offense kind of knows that too. So they know if Carlos is going to drop, they know for the most part, like when or the rational scenarios where that would happen. When you insert in Nwosu, and like you said, where the offense can force outside linebackers to cover down. Well, Seattle made sure that Carlos Dunlap was rarely ever tasked with something as egregious as that. When you have Nwosu, it just further to your point, Matty, it makes the defense, their base defense, that much more flexible. There are less things that they have to scheme around, where if they form a slot formation to either Taylor or Nwosu's side, you're going to find either one of them all the way out on a slot receiver aligned across from a slot with inside leverage. So like, and
whereas before, like in the past, that might have been, we need to check into like a 3-man rush drop 8 defense, or
right,
we need to slant the line to make this work. We need to change our rotation on the back end to make this work.
Right. And like part of the thing is that was the issue that they had last year, and they were aware of that. And that's why Carlos Dunlap was not part of the base defense. That's why he was a nickel defender, but then he's also one of your best pass rushers. So, okay, we have to find a way to shoehorn him in more snaps. That means playing him more base. And then therefore that means having to do all those things that you just said. So now with Nwosu and Taylor, again, if they want to stretch the edge of the defense out on the line of scrimmage, then go for it, because Nwosu and Taylor can give you Bruce Irvin-esque coverage abilities in those areas. Again, you're still not having Darrell Taylor carry Cooper Kupp 30 yards downfield, but buzzing to the flat or even carrying the occasional wheel from a tight end, those guys can do that. It provides them, it allows them to be what they want to be when they want to be it. in base and nickel. So
Okay. And I also think about like the Kerry Hyder edition, where he was still very much looking more like a 4-3 kind of dude. Like I get he was a big end, but I don't think he'd had that much experience playing like inside of a tackle in terms of fitting the run, like as a like a
Right.
4-eye, right? But then he got reps in at least in preseason practices working out with the outside linebackers types, like the edge rusher types.
Right.
And it's like, what's going on there? And then it's like, oh well, in nickel he's going to be the rush 3 technique, and it's like, well, that's the only thing which makes sense. But that's like a hyper specific role for a dude who, aside from that, didn't really have an obvious fit, and he went and struggled, which
Yeah.
So this year, do you think they just play more like? I mean, they tried to establish it last year, but had some challenges. But do you think they play that? Well, the way I see it is 3-4 is more like right and left, right? Like someone just works the left
Yeah.
side of the field, someone just works the right side of the field, because you don't have to necessarily position them to the field or the boundary or the weak side of a call or the strong side of a call, because they are able to rush and drop depending on the formation that the offense aligns in and where they place the most receivers on the field, right? So
Right.
do you agree that it's just going to be more right and left, or is there like a? I mean, really, you want Taylor to be rushing more than anyone else. So
Yeah. That's a good point. I don't know. We'll see. That makes it super interesting. And then you want to know how they pair the rotations behind it. Like what side is the safety dropping down when they are indeed, playing middle of the field closed one highs. So I guess we really there's no concrete way of like, guessing that, right? And we'll just have to wait and see, because they could do either. Yeah, I real quick, Alton Robinson is another guy who will definitely be getting snaps. He just doesn't seem like he has the traits to be a high-end guy, but he is skilled at the top of the rush.
you think he'll get snaps?
Yeah, I think they'll throw him in there. Let him circulate in and out with especially Tyreek Smith, and then let them see who rises to the top.
Yeah, like how do you think that might be divvied up at first between Smith and Robinson to start the year?
Whoever does best in preseason is how it should be done. But
yeah,
depends if Smith can learn the playbook in.
Yeah. And then each guy in base, they're gonna have a first guy off the bench for base, and then they're gonna have a depth chart, and then they're gonna have a depth chart for first off the bench and nickel. And those might be the same coincidentally, but they're not gonna be same. They're not gonna be the same for the sake of it. They're two separate worlds that they'll determine.
And the first guy off the bench in nickel could actually be an interior rusher rather than an edge.
Right.
True.
You just need an extra pass rusher, and you just plug him where is best and where the chemistry is best. So that's something really to keep an eye on. Should we move towards the interior of the defensive line?
Yeah. Well, one last thing for real this time.
Good, I checked.
We'll see what happens with Aaron Donkor. Dude put on weight, and he's incredibly explosive. And Pete called him annoying, and I took that as a compliment.
Really?
Yeah, like annoying player in camp, like
seems like good praise.
Just like giving guys just a trouble, like never giving up stuff. So we'll see what goes on there.
He looked kind of good in that Chargers game.
He did. I mean, he was doing real edge rush things.
Well, and as you've pointed out, Griffin, the sort of lower down the depth chart linebackers on the inside are kind of like those high motor guys in the like Staley Fangio system, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of high athletic plug and play guys. Well, the edge is kind of like that annoying type, right? You just need a motor and hustle and to be annoying. So it sounds like Donga's hanging around.
Yeah, we'll see.
So in interior of the defensive line, I guess we start with the kind of 3-tech big end types, and then we'll talk about the nose afterwards. So Al Woods will consider a nose, but he is a big end too, if needed. Like he can play 3 technique, right? Like he's just can do everything, but he's predominantly a run down guy.
Right.
Now the 3-tech big end types are Shelby Harris, off-season ad, Poona Ford, Quinton Jefferson, LJ Collier, Jared Hewitt, and Miles Adams. So, what do you think of that?
I think they have a strong interior. I think Adams, or excuse me, at big end, yeah, it's Harris. I think he's the guy of all these interior players that actually have the most pass rush, and the fact that he can play him on base downs means that they don't have to wait until nickel to actually get their edge rushers out there. He's not like elite, but he's higher end, so that's a good sign. Al Woods is just a monster. Allows them to two gap when they want to play heavier techniques, even when they're not two gapping. Puna Ford is just he's a really good run defender. He shows some life in pass rush, just not consistently. It's another off season where he looks slightly leaner yet again, and maybe he's trying to get the most out of himself for pass rush. And I think even at like a 290, 295, whatever he is, he'd still be a good one-on-one run defender on guards as a three technique. So Quentin Jefferson is a good signing because he is a legit pass rushing three technique, and I imagine we're probably only going to see him in nickel when they trot out their four-man nickel fronts. And Brian Monet is essentially just like a roster mirror to Al Woods. I think we only ever see him at nose tackle, though. I don't think we see him at big end, 4I or 4. Maybe we have.
Stay away from the nose tackles for now.
Oh, okay.
Go with Collier.
Oh yeah, Collier. So just looking at the numbers, I don't know how many interior can they keep, because I feel like Miles Adams is ahead of Collier as a player, and Collier again is just like Quentin Jefferson, is only really going to be getting snaps now at this point as a pass rusher three technique, I think. I mean, Shelby kicks him out of base, and then Jefferson might be kicking him out of nickel. And
he needs an injury to happen, basically, is the way I see it, which is a horrid way of phrasing it. But I'm the same as you. I don't see how he sticks around.
I mean, and also it's a slim chance that Miles Adams also makes a 53, even though I think he's more than worthy of it, because they have 6 guys right now. And are they going to keep 6 defensive tackles?
Especially with, the fact that the way they're playing these guys up front, if we're talking in the 3-4, the bear look, they're pretty plug and play. Now they've got the skill sets there. They're pretty plug and play in the sense that, like, if you're a 3 tech, you're going to power step. Well, all of these guys know how to power step on a guy and play in the B gap on the outside shoulder of the guard. And then if you're 4I, you're going to mirror step a tackle. And like Al Woods can do that. You're sort of playing almost 2 gap like. Al Woods can do that. Shelby Harris can do that. Puna Ford can do that. Quentin Jefferson, I mean, I'm sure he knows what that is, but to a high level, I'd be a bit more doubtful, which again suggests he's more of that kind of nickel rush 3 tech. But I've just mentioned there like 4 guys who can do that thing that Collier struggled with against Tennessee, right? Sorry, I forgot to mention Miles Adams, who can do both those things, and it continues to improve, right? So
right.
And they can do each spot, right? They can do the 3 tech or the 4I, so they can play on the interior. Now, Collier can't play nose, and he wouldn't be expected to, but Seattle's set at nose as well. So it doesn't look... I don't really see... He'd have to really just show pass rush. I kind of view, if Collier is going to make the roster based on what I've just said, really he has to just come alive as a pass rusher in the nickel rush package. That's where Pete Howard's mentioned he has high hopes for him, as that kind of interior dude in the nickel, like even 4 down fronts, where he will just be battling with Quentin Jefferson, won't he, to make the roster? So interesting to watch that.
Right.
So you mentioned Puna Ford losing a bit of weight again. I guess it's because this is the last year of his contract. He hits free agency again next year. If he's going to get paid, he has to string together those quickness, moves, the quick swim that he's flashed from 3 tech. Sometimes, like, if a guard short sets him, he just and he's read pass, or it's a pass for a situation, he's batting in the backfield, and it's like, wow, like there's something here. And we've spoke about his ability to bend in his lower half, because he's helped by his short stature, right? but it's
Yeah.
never just quite come together on a consistent string of games for him as a disruptor, rushing from the interior. So this is a guess. If he's saying I'm gonna really work out at 3 tech, I'm gonna slim down more, use my quickness. He's mainly
Right.
going to be one-on-one because in run situations, because of the bare fronts, then let's
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. We'll see. Yeah, is he their best defensive interior player? Puna?
Yeah, I think so. But this is the thing. Like, you could say like Shelby Harris is probably their best interior rusher, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Puna Ford's probably their best all-rounder.
Agreed. And
then
Harris is no
Al,
slouch run
Yeah,
defender.
and then Woods is
No.
the best run defender.
and then Al Woods is like the best pure run defender. But then the
So
guy we
it's-
haven't mentioned because I tried to limit it to Big End Tour and Miles Adams, sneaky bet to make the roster. We both really like him, and he was great last preseason. Technically sound, and really explosive, and kind of has that same. I don't know how short he is, but he has that real squat ability to sink in the hips and knock dudes back. He's 6'2", but he plays like lower than that. Really good
Yeah.
pad level and ability to
and extension.
yeah, shoot
'Cause-
the hands.
Yeah, he gets under you and like he wins the immediate ground in the area.
Yeah.
And then as a pass rusher, I mean, he just constantly is throwing his hands and he gets into the backfield. Like the few snaps he had against the Rams, they have a decent interior, and he's just slicing them up the middle. And like Stafford's holding the ball a little bit, but they can't sustain blocks on him, and he's like ping ponging off the guard and the center and getting free. And he was doing that in preseason too, and out of alignments that are not meant for pass rushing either. His explosiveness and hands are a little too much for, third quarter, fourth quarter preseason offensive lineman.
And so then the last guy is nose tackle Brian Monet, who is the only like pure nose on the roster. He could maybe develop into something else, but he's just big and
Controls blocks.
Yeah, recently got extended to so he's on an exclusive rights free agent tender, so that covers him this year. But then he got handed an additional 2 years for a contract worth up to $12 million. I think he's earned that. He's an excellent run defender. Turns 27 in October, so he'll be 30 in the year his deal expires. But very, very good and perfect for the Bear stuff, like knocking guys back, winning against doubles, keeping doubles off Brooks and the other linebackers. So yeah, he got banged up last year and they missed him. Like when he was out against Tennessee, for instance, they really struggled without him.
Yep.
Yeah, it became pretty apparent there in the early going that he's a lot more important to the defense than some probably think. And so I even saw, people were surprised that he got extended, and it's like, no, he's pretty key part to all of this.
Yeah, and it sets them up for a post Woods future as well because
well, that's the big thing too. Is like Al Woods could hang it up after this year.
I'm
going to be a
pretty
free
sure
agent
he
at least.
will. Yeah. And Mono's a cool story because like he came out and was like overweight, really looked awful. I had some million tweets about him in his rookie year where he just did not look like he could hang. But now, like he's improved every year. Kind of testament to the work Clint Hurt did as a D-line coach, coaching these guys up technique-wise. But now he's really, really good.
And another reason why we're rooting for Miles Adams to make the roster is because there's a very real chance they could have significant snaps where all three interior are undrafted free agents between Puna Ford, Monet, and Miles Adams. And, that the skill set distribution works because either Puna or Adams could be playing big end or 3 technique. And you got Mona in the middle. So like that could actually, and they'd be good too. No one would run on that line. So that'd be cool.
The other guy who was impressive last preseason, not quite as impressive, was Jawad Hewitt. He's 24. I think he's still practice squad eligible, He's another undrafted free agent in 2021. He did some good things. Interesting to see. Like, again, like he'll be pushing Collier. So yeah.
So taking the three techs and the nose, well, there's only one nose really, into account here. How many of these guys do you think they're actually going to carry?
So they're going to have to go light somewhere else because
I feel like they're only going to be able to carry like 4.
I think 6.
They have to. I think 5 would have to be the minimum, and then they're going to have to try to BS Nick Ballore as a off-ball linebacker, and then maybe consider the outside linebackers as part of the overall linebacker depth in their own heads, or they might just go crazy with practice squad linebacker depth because there's no way, obviously, Puna, Mona, Harris, and Woods or locks, like locks.
Yeah.
And the Quentin Jefferson, they paid him, so he's probably a lock. That's 5 right there.
Yeah.
And then
they gave him a 2-year deal too. So
one of Adams or Collier is the way I see it.
Right.
So it's got to be 6.
Right. So yeah. So they can't carry 7. Obviously, that's just too much. So Adams and Collier. I mean, yeah.
This is why I was slightly
Collier
surprised.
gets dealt to Carolina for a 6th round pick in a couple of months.
That'd be nice. This is why I was slightly surprised, Griffin, at you saying that you thought Olsen Robinson would get a lot of opportunities, because I actually could see a world where he gets cut. Where
That's possible.
It's Taylor, Maffei, Tyreek Smith, and Rosu, and then they can carry Donk on the practice squad, for instance, and they say, "Bye, Olsen, sorry, but we got 4 outside linebackers, Donker waiting on the practice squad. Another 2 or so on the practice squad. That's that."
Yeah. It depends or not if Alton Robinson takes performance-enhancing drugs, because if he was just a little bit stronger, he would actually be really good because he's a skilled player.
Okay, so, and the one thing to say about the linebackers as we transition to inside linebackers very smoothly is you need quite a few of them for special teams. Like they have the body type which is necessary, and you can't really find that elsewhere, especially with like the depth of the fullback and teams not carrying 2 backs really, like 2 back personnel carrying more receivers. It's hard to find that like 2 20s to 2 40s can run type of build for specials, which is so important. So yeah,
Indeed.
interesting to see how that shakes out. Inside linebacker wise, we have the guy he just happened to bump into today, Jordan Brooks.
Yeah, what a good omen. I ran into Jordan Brooks at the mall on the same day that Seattle Overload was recording its off-season defensive positional preview for the training camp.
But like, why didn't you ask him to come onto the show?
That's right.
Feels like a missed opportunity.
He was on the phone, and I was giving him space and respect. But if had he not been on the phone, I totally would have asked him. Yeah. So inside linebackers. They really, obviously, it's Jordan Brooks, and then in Bobby Wagner's absence, we now have Cody Barton replacing him, and we're finally going to see Cody Barton be a starter. When that, I think, you don't trade up for a guy in the 3rd. Well, it's still a 3rd round pick, but they did trade up for him. There were always high hopes that he would be starting material. So we're finally going to see what that draft pick means with the full season of reps. And then backing him up really quick, Benberg Curvin's recovery status is still unknown.
That sounds rough.
That sounds rough. If he wasn't hurt, he sounds like the type of backup linebacker where you don't completely panic.
I mean, he was so good. That was the worst thing as well. Like injuries do suck, but he was so good in the preseason last year. He was proving me wrong. And
he's a good athlete too. Like, he's not a 4.4 guy. He's like a 4.6 guy with good agility. Like, that's something. And then they signed the I forgot his name.
Levi Jones. Jones.
But the special teamer from Chicago.
Joel Boniway.
There you
Nice.
go. Perfect.
Good work, Ty.
Joel. Is this
Joel,
choice?
Joel,
Yeah.
yes.
Or as
Or
we'd say
Joel.
here, Joel.
It could be either, right? I don't know.
I think Pro Football Reference says it's Joel, like Joel
Okay.
Embiid.
Well, they're
Yeah.
never wrong. So
Never ever.
So I mean, he's a special teamer. Like he's not, but he will. I imagine is part of the linebacker depth still.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's just the case. You know, it's a 1-year deal. It's big time for special teams. He knows like the Desai. You know, I don't. If he's playing, I think they're in trouble. But,
Right.
You know.
So, but I think that they only carry like John Radigan. I think they want him on the practice squad, and they
Yep.
call him up if something horrible happens. So I mean, are they going to roll into the regular season with 3 off-ball linebackers?
Well,
and then count
and Nick
Ballore as
Ballore.
the 4th?
Yeah, I think
Well,
so.
Just Cody and Jordan don't get hurt, please.
And Radigan tore his ACL, right? And that was like week 14. It was that Tuesday game against the Rams.
Yeah, special teams.
So that's pretty late into the year. So who knows if he's even going to be ready?
Yeah, rough.
So,
Well, like this is the thing with moving to a 3-4, but you know, like actually calling it a 3-4. If you think about last year, they probably had 6 linebackers on the roster, if you're including Sam's within Alf Balls, right? They had Wagner, Barton, BBK, and then no, BBK got hurt, so they had Wagner, Barton, Brooks, and then they had Ballore.
Yeah.
And then they had the Sams of Taylor, who was technically a Sam. It got a bit messy. Well, they basically had 2 Sams, right? They had Benton Mayowa and Alton Robinson, yeah.
Yeah,
so
but I mean,
they basically fiddled around with 6 linebackers. So it's the same deal here. So four, I don't think 4 or 3/4 is necessarily that crazy for inside linebacker.
No, I agree.
However, the kind of limited aspect of the depth suggests to me that it just re-emphasizes that, you know, the bare fronts are going to be the base in 3-4, right? Where you have these 2 inside linebackers, you have Barton and you have Brooks. Now, how much of that is like Brooks being like aligning as the Mike is going to be interesting. Really, the way that those 2 work is, in my opinion, Barton is more of a Mike in terms of their strengths, whereas Brooks can do either. He's just a true unbelievable linebacker, but he's probably more suited to going out in space more and walking to a slot than Barton is. Whereas Barton's more of like a downhill north-south kind of player.
And then go ahead.
But before we get to that, and then after the base stuff, the nickel stuff is more going to be like 4-2-5 personnel, or 2-4-5, but still just 2 inside linebackers.
Right.
Now, how they handle that as well, and who gets what assignment is going to be interesting too. But anyway,
I think from what very, very little clips that we've gotten from like scrimmages and stuff, and just walkthroughs from training camp or not training camp, mini camp and OTAs, it does seem like Jordan Brooks is still playing the equivalent of Will. Like in 2 high stuff, he's playing like a curl or a quarter flat, and then, well, if it's cover 3, he and Cody are essentially doing the same thing, and that they're playing a hook. It's just relative to what the offensive formation is where they would align. But it does seem like Cody's a Mike, and on top of, like, in addition to what you were saying earlier, like what's best for who, like Jordan, he can do both, and Cody seems more like a Mike. Part of, like, think about how many plays in the flat some like the Will would have to play in 2 high spacing, where the flat gets drained out and you're the only guy there. You'd rather have Jordan running someone down in space, one with the speed.
You'd rather have
an elite tackler.
You'd rather have Jordan have to carry a wheel route as well, which in a quarter flat technique you'd have to do. In a curl flat technique, you probably have to do as well in cover 3. So makes complete sense to have him like that, and also easier if he's at Will rather than at Mike, to get him on the edge of the defense. Whatever they want to call it this year, him being out in space more makes sense for a variety of reasons. And from a Barton perspective, I'm really excited to see him have this offseason being the guy off the ball, because the Sam stuff never worked. Like, it was a disaster. He didn't have the strength at the point of attack. Like, that's just that was never his game. Like,
Guy's 235. Yeah.
Like, I didn't quite understand the Seahawks defense as well as I do now. But looking back, like, Sam just did not make sense because you're on the ball. It made much more sense to have him where you're on the ball a lot of the time, especially when they're running these reduced over fronts with the Sam down.
I mean, Kendricks was hurt though. They were kind of
that's the problem. He got thrust into a bad spot where he probably hadn't even been preparing for that kind of action.
Yeah.
He's always been an off-ball guy and then last year he played so fast, so instinctive and correct.
Yeah.
And his coverage showed up again.
So like
Hurt praised it.
So Matty, you scouted him and did a huge article on him when he was drafted. So let's like go back to like, what is Cody?
Mm-hmm.
He's like 6'2", 235. He runs like a 4.6, but his 20-yard shuttle was like well above average. His 3-cone was well above average, not elite, but above average.
Mm-hmm.
He in space, just running around doing stuff. He can like drop his hips and change direction really well, like subtle movements. He has pretty good acceleration. Like in a 30 by 30 box, he's an above average athlete. And then which is good.
His weakness is his arms are under 32 inches, which again doesn't help down on the edge.
Right, it doesn't help down on the edge. Let's take stock of what the coaches have said about him, because that's all that we have really to go on in terms of, well, that's not entirely true, but back in 2019, Pete Carroll said he's the best cover linebacker on the team. That was when Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright were still elite. Now, what does that actually mean? I mean, if you put him out there, he's not going to play better than either of those two. But I imagine he's getting that impression based off of seeing him in practice, but like also in training camp where they're in shorts. And I have no doubt that like in shorts, Cody Barton's probably one of the most impressive athletes on the entire team. Just running around in space, downfield, changing direct, like all that is there.
Safety background. Yeah.
Safety background. And granted, what few snaps we had of him as a rookie off ball, he has a collection of some really impressive stuff. Like covering slot fades one-on-one with the receiver, carrying a wheel route that turned into almost like an in-breaking route against the Eagles in 2019. It's like, it just shows the raw talent is there. And then also like carrying tight ends against the Panthers as taking like the number 3 receiver up, who's tight end. Then he had another great play where he was the Mike in pure Tampa 2. He has 2 seams, and if you think, Tampa 2, you got seam routes, then he has to carry one of them. He goes to open to one of the seam routes, but then that seam route stems outside of the near linebacker, the curl defender. So he's immediately like, okay, that's not, maybe I need to get depth on that route, but I need to get my eyes on the other vertical route that's to his right. And sure enough, he gets his hands and breaks on it. And then he breaks on the route before he also sees the quarterback transition another seam route. He breaks on the route before the quarterback releases the ball, but he's putting the entire picture together and actually gets a pass deflection on it. And like, that's, if Bobby did that, I'd be like, well, that's why Bobby's an all-pro. And Bobby did do stuff like that, right? And Cody made that play. So it's like, this guy's he can run with guys and he can be a good spot dropper. And that's just the small collection of snaps that we have. He was a little shaky against Minnesota when he was starting in 2020. He made some bad plays when he wasn't taking on contact well because he wasn't diagnosing the play well. But then there are some snaps that game where when he was diagnosing the play well, that meant his eyes were in the right place, then his feet were in the right place. Then he took on contact fine. So it's like he needs to get in the right spots for it. Sure enough, when he comes in to replace Wagner, who had a tragic injury to end his season this past year against the Lions, I mean, he's flying everywhere in the box. He's not having any contact issues because sure enough, he's in the right spot almost every single time with pullers, moving gaps and stuff. It's just, he's ahead of the play. He's making plays in the backfield. He's clearly got his confidence back. And then coming down, defending the check down, I mean, we saw the huge difference in speed between Cody and Bobby, who Bobby is not the guy who he used to be. And Cody wasn't hesitating like when he was face up with the runner. He was just coming down and killing the back or killing the check down when he was being more timid before. And then also as a spot dropper, especially in what little we saw with him, like against the Cardinals in that strong hook, stacking his zone, understanding what the pattern was, playing with the eyes in the back of his head. And he showed in 2 games, it's like if you got 17 games out of that, the Seahawks are fine at middle linebacker. It's just we have no idea what the variance will be for him. But he's hit all the notes in terms of can he do that? The answer is yes, but how consistent can he be? And I don't think anybody knows the answer. He doesn't know the answer until he can play for a full 17 games. So he has the talent, though. Maddie, what are your thoughts, extended thoughts, and time?
Well,
Cody?
basically the same as that. He turns only 26 in November, so he's still relatively young, right? And I feel it's all just a confidence thing where that Bears game would have been so big for him because it all just came together, and as it did for the rest of the season. And I think the scheme helps him in terms of playing instinctive and keeping him clean. Not that D lines, when they're playing in like a 4-down front, aren't trying to keep linebackers clean, but you don't have a bubble, so he can really read stuff out and then go and fire his gun a bit more in bare like odd space stuff. So I think that helps. So before we get to the safeties, because I wanted to transition there and say about how I'm interested to see if with the depth behind being more kind of special teamsy, I wanted to wonder if perhaps this was we're going to see a bit more dime with a safety and an inside linebacker given Seattle's depth there. But before we get to that, this podcast is brought to you by Ryan Davis. We're very grateful for that. He listens to every single podcast. And he just got in touch saying he was interested in sponsoring an episode to help us out. He's a big Seahawks fan who feels a lot smarter listening to us, which is just very kind of him to say that. And it brings him joy to hear a younger generation of Seattle fans talking about the team. So thank you, Ryan. Always
Thank
helps
you,
out.
Ryan.
Very
We
kind
love
of
you, Ryan.
There we go. Right, so safeties.
Safeties. Seattle's strongest position group.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so. I was looking at the depth chart. I think interior defensive line, you could say, as we covered, but the depth chart, Adams, Diggs is damn good. Neal is decent, right? Now, if we say that nickel can play safety, because they can and they have similar assignments, especially when they're playing in that deep half. And Marquise Blair in particular, he's actually probably played more snaps as safeties for Seattle than nickel, unfortunately. And then Ugo Amadi as well, he has a safety background. You include those guys, then you think about Josh Jones, who came in last year and pretty good. He's a savvy vet and he's athletic. And then there's all these names like Deontay Williams, Bubba Bolden, Scott Nelson, Joey Blunt, and they probably will just be those kind of guys like Joshua Moon. There's a name who come in preseason. They just play in the preseason and they're just there, and then you don't hear from them. But they could do something as well. But the top end of that, there's some real safety depth, right?
Yeah,
and talent.
It kind of makes me think that maybe someone like Neal might get traded.
Interesting.
Ooh. Depends on Blair's recovery.
Yeah,
I feel like Neal's such a good glue guy and special teams guy that would be tough. But you are right. There's a surplus, you could say.
They've got all these guys, and I think we should try to find out how they fit in base. It's Diggs and Adams, and it's only Diggs and Adams. In nickel, though, that's where things get interesting. At nickel zone, Blair and Ugo are probably going to factor into like the nickel, or maybe even are they going to call it the star role, where they're down essentially.
Have they started doing that?
We haven't heard it yet, and I don't think they're going to give us anything. It would require somebody like wink, wink, nudge, nudging to them in a press conference in order to get that out of them. But so like zone related activities, that just means like you carrying a seam route, and we'll see if we'll see a nickel match a route in 2-eye zone with outside leverage, because this past year it's all been inside leverage, and Ugo Amadi, for whatever reason, actually we know why, it's because he's really cerebral player with the safety background like you're talking about. He's incredibly good at carrying those routes with inside leverage while keeping eyes on the routes and matching depth and being aware of the in-breaking route from the outside receiver, but still having eyes on the quarterback. Like watching Ugo Amadi do that in zone specifically, it's wow, he has the brain of an elite linebacker, but unfortunately he's 5'10", 200 and does not run a 4.4. So, and that
Short Kings.
Short Kings, and he's honestly like a brilliant player. Like when we talk about KJ Wright has eyes on the back of his head, Ugo Amadi does a lot of that same stuff. It's just that when you go into man coverage, he did improve and he showed signs of life, but like you can't stick him on Cooper Kupp like you even might say peak Jeremy Lane in a pinch, right? Just to where you're like, okay, you can call cover one because we have a viable nickel corner.
Ugo's always on the verge of getting beat. Like in man.
He's a safety basically,
yeah.
But that speaks to what nickel means in zone. Like big, I mean, effectively it's kind of big nickel when Ugo Amadi's out there.
And to add to that as well, his given you've taken us from safeties to nickels, his element of disguise, like he's so good at disguising things. It's something Pete Carroll's complimented on, and also Clint Hurt, but he really makes it all look the same, but also good at coming up in downs and distances which allow for it. Coming up, mugging the front, sugaring the line of scrimmage as though he's going to blitz, and then backing out at the right time, syncing it up with the quarterback cadence. He's a very savvy, good football player.
And so then this is where, so Marquise Blair, his skill set is way more intriguing than Ugo's, but to date he has not been as good as Ugo as in zone principles. Like he just hasn't been in the underneath. But if they transition to say more outside leverage matching, or just say they think they can get him up to speed where Ugo's good, do they like his long speed? Do they like his length to be able to play? Do they like his frame more? And does he knock on the door to play? I don't know. What is interesting though, and we'll never know unless unfortunately someone gets hurt, Marquise Blair's skill set in a quarter's defense is really intriguing to me because he's so explosive in the short area and he's so linear, but he can change direction, like really sharp angles just in his movements. Like not even like, oh, he took a good pursuit angle. I don't mean that. Just like how he moves around. And you think about in quarters, like robbing posts to curl or puck, he has the explosion to contest a dig route in quarters.
In a flat-footed quarters technique where he's just scooching, reading really the quarterback for that dig window basically to come down, he'd cause a lot of problems, especially to the boundary where shorter space, basically doing what Jamal Adams does. But unfortunately he got hurt and they made the Adams trade. Adams can do a lot more things than Blair. But Blair kind of feels like just not quite the wrong time, wrong place, that kind of deal.
Which is why they're trying to make him a thing at nickel. I just don't know. But so with all these skill sets, and then we know Ryan Neal can match up and he can kind of play essentially a dime backer role because they are supposedly going to be playing more cover one. That man package phrasing will grow.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
well, why are they playing more cover one, Griff? That's something to talk about.
Well, so they want to be able to accent their base zone coverage to get so that they're not getting picked apart, just because zone is still what zone is, even if you're matching heavily, which they always do. You want to be able to accent your base calls. You want to be able to do that by playing really sticky man coverage. So you can weave in and out of calls. You don't become predictable. You can become multiple, but also you play cover one so that when you go into 4 down, or rather so that you can play more 4 down fronts, so you can get your edge rushers going, because it's hard to get your edge rushers going in a bear front. It's hard to get your 4-man rush going in a bear front, period, for all of them. So it becomes a chicken or the egg thing. Do they want to play more cover one, or do they wanting to play more 4-man fronts when they can get away with it? And they would like to pair cover one with cover 4 when they can, or with 4 down when they can. So it's kind of it becomes circular. One reinforces the other up front in the backfield in terms of rostering and what they want to do schematically. But when they go into cover one, and Matty, you can have and Ty, you guys can insert your thoughts there. But when they do that, obviously Neal and Blair, that's where they can get more of these guys on the field to mix and match skill sets
And play dime.
and play dime. But my thinking is if Neal you can stick Neal on the tight end, you can do things with him. Can he also possibly potentially feature as the nickel in their zone stuff in the underneath? It's you know what I'm saying? Like it does translate. You even think cover 3 when Neal has played down at the line of scrimmage carrying a seam route in cover 3, like cover 3 match to a 2x2 formation. What really is the difference to a slot formation carrying that route? Do they think Neal might feature in as that star player? Because historically, a lot of those Fangio defenses, they've had guys with pure safety, strong safety backgrounds playing nickel, and they've had legit cornerbacks playing that nickel spot. Like Jalen Ramsey, obviously also has a safety background, but they kick him in nickel. And then also Carl Scott with Minnesota, they had Harrison Smith interchange at nickel with their nickel cornerback when they're 2 high zone stuff, essentially playing star like Jalen Ramsey. Do they see that potential with Ryan Neal and just really value his length? So it becomes Neal's traits and skills with Ugo Amadi's experience and understanding.
Nick Saban had Minka Fitzpatrick played the star, right?
Right. And what's Minka doing now? He's playing the Earl Thomas role. He's playing the Quandre Diggs role in cover 3. So I mean, they could do that with Neal. I don't know if they will, just because they have an abundance of Justin Coleman. Could he play star? He feels more like a cover 1 nickel, right? Like, put him on a slot receiver nickel. Like
he's kind of the odd one out in that sense.
So they
he's
have
like
all this
the throwback slot corner. But then also the deal here is like the slot position on the offensive side of the football has moved away from those, like, generally speaking, those like quick, agile, like option route types, like the Edelmans, the Cole Beasleys, the Wes Welkers, the Andy Isabellas, if he'd actually become a thing, those types, and more towards
Doug Baldwin, all the Baldwin key.
Baldwin, that's a good one to finish on, and more towards. Well, not more towards, but there's just different types of athlete who you can put into the slot, and like big slots.
Tyler Lockett, Tyreek Hill, and then the bigger slots, like you said, too.
Yes. Yeah, true. So explosive, but you can still be short, but they're not really necessarily the most agile. They're like downfield stretches. They're running over routes. So it's, And
you're gonna get tight ends flexed out into the slot too.
So you need body types you can match with that, and so what we're saying really is Seattle has these body types to match up with it. And then safety wise, Adams can do pretty much anything they want him to do, in my opinion. And then Quandre Diggs is just a superb, like, deep safety. He can do a tiny bit of underneath if you need him to, but really keep him deep because he's so good at it. Deep half, or even deep middle third. So I've been on a few podcasts recently. Sorry, guys. I was planning to tell you about it. I've been asked on a number of occasions, Griffin, how would you get the best out of Jamal Adams? So, Griffin, how would you get the best out of Jamal Adams?
The phrasing is weird to me because how they used him last year is how any team should be using him. At least
they didn't blitz him as much, Griffin.
So they were still
Griffin, he didn't get a sack. He didn't get a single sack. He had 0 sacks, Griffin.
Yeah.
So they went from sending him almost more than he was ever sent in New York in 2020 to still sending him like 3 to 4 times a game, which is roughly his New York average. It's just the production was there. Now there were some cases where it's like they were trying to figure out when to send him, and that wasn't as fun. And they send him under different contexts. Sometimes they send him to blitz the run, and sometimes they're sending or to blitz potential play action. Sometimes they're sending him to or sometimes they're sending him to blitz the actual rush the passer. All in all, he needs to be, when it's too high, he needs to be playing a hard quarter. They need their strong safety or their weak safety technically to be able to spin down and play a hook zone underneath zones when you're disguising your transition to cover 3 snap to snap. You need him to be able to mark up tight ends and some receivers So like ultimately, and then it's last year when they played more cover one in the middle of the season, when they started to build that package up, it was about interchanging him and Neil schematically, and let Neil take the tight end, or then send Neil, let Adams take the tight end, send Neil, let Adams play the hole, the robber, which he's exceptional at, like Tyrann Mathieu, in my opinion. So, and then one thing they did say was making Diggs and Adams interchangeable in terms of who aligns where. That means what's really exciting about that isn't that in any given snap, Adams could be playing to the passing strength and too high, which that does mean that. But what means is when they then do play cover three, they could rotate strong and get him toward the passing strength and the underneath, which is what they couldn't do last year. They could only rotate strong last year with Diggs on pure passing downs, and they did it to great effect. They killed a lot of like pure drop back passing concepts with it, but you couldn't do it on early downs, because to do it on the early downs would have meant giving Quandre Diggs a run fit that you don't want to give to him. And if they're going to rotate down on early downs, it means spinning weak, and they can't get Adams where they would like to have him to take pressure off Wagner. Now with Cody Barton, it might be all moot because he might be able to handle that now better than Bobby could, and aging Bobby could. So I don't know, but ultimately it's, you continue to use him the way that's using him. The way that you get the most out of him, I think really is not a matter of what you're doing with him. I think part of why they moved on from Andre Curtis and Ken Norton Jr. was to get Adams back playing the technique and confidence that he had in New York. All in all, he's the same player to me as he was in New York in zone, underneath, and too high. I mean, 2020, the back half of 2020, he was on Bobby and KJ's level in terms of playing hook zones and stuff, and
He was
part
just
of the zone matching. It was great.
just had
honestly.
his arm hurt. He couldn't lift his arm up to contest that ball to cup. That was the only issue.
Yeah, and he was carrying seams the whole stretch just fine. And then in 2021, I thought he was great playing playing the hard quarter. He had the one snafu on national television where he was a two-man, where he saw Stafford looking to gear up, and he saw Deshaun Jackson running hot down the pipe toward him, and he turned his head and thought he was playing the ball correctly when he should have just played more confidently. Looked back, granted, Sidney Jones had a horrible rep, and because you're supposed to have top-down coverage on it,
didn't catch it.
Yeah. So, but outside of that, to me, Adams has been what they've wanted him to be in the shell coverage and in the underneath zone stuff. Where he's regressed specifically has been in one-on-one man and or matchup scenarios. And like the more concerning rep to me in that Rams game was when he gave up that touchdown to Tyler Higbee. He's playing with no confidence on that route. He's, opening his hips up like he's trying to get in the red zone
as well,
giving 10 yards of air on it. It's just, why are you thinking that's what you need to do there? And then also there's miscommunications with the other cornerbacks in man coverage with like handling exchanges at the line of scrimmage, like picks and rubs and stuff with their stack checks and bunch checks. So I think this part of these moves is not scheme even as much as it is Desai and Carl Scott just coaching Jamal again. Like literally the
different message, like a young message, coverage dudes who are used to the back seven.
Because
they've worked with a lot of different types.
And what Pete talked about, second chances all off season with players, and he talked about how Darrell Taylor needed a fresh start. I think part of these moves about Jamal getting a fresh start, because Jamal was good at that in New York. I mean, he has games against Rob Gronkowski and Zach Ertz where he's giving them, a tough game.
But was that mainly from press coverage though? Press man?
Yeah, I think it was press, but also he's good, and I think he's good enough, man, in terms of reading the receiver, reading the routes, and breaking on it. It's just he clearly has moments where he doesn't look confident, and I think they need to get him back there. Statistically, he has regressed in man coverage, and he needs to be a good enough player that you can stick him on a tight end and handle tight ends. And because he historically,
with his body type, he has to be able to do that. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that they need to resurrect what he's supposed to be. Because the other stuff, I mean, if he's the full package there in terms of hitting all those notes, the versatility is like makes the defense limitlessly flexible.
Because he's the piece which ties everything together: fit, coverage front.
Right. I mean, the strong safeties are like a linchpin in that sense. They find themselves everywhere. In
Yep.
terms of flexibility.
Okay, so cornerback wise, you were mentioning about running lots of cover one. Well, that sounds great until you look at the Seahawks cornerback group and you have a few doubts. Or do you? Because they've added in Artie Burns, Kobe Bryant, and Tariq Woolen to the existing John Reed, Mike Jackson, Sidney Jones, Trey Brown. How does that look to you? Because it could be really good. Like the best case scenario that I can envision for this is really good, but then also there's kind of a flaw which I'm a bit concerned about.
Oh, there's a very like it could be a disaster. There's like an actual like real possibility of this being a disaster. I'm still upset that they didn't re-sign DJ Reed for the deal that he got from New York. I think that's pretty ridiculous, especially with him saying that. Was he that said that they kind of lowballed him or something?
Well,
Like he felt disrespected.
He did get paid in New York, relatively, given his lack of durability.
Sure, but still, I don't know. I would have given them that deal if it was
same.
But
same. I mean, that was roughly my prediction of what I thought Seattle would pay him. So, is on paper it's high variance. Like it could go so many different directions. The returning incumbents, the main returning guys, of course, are Sidney Jones and Trey Brown. There are, including Artie Burns, all three of those guys had very good stretches of play last year. And if they didn't have when they weren't having a good stretch of play, they were having a bad stretch of play or they were hurt. So those are like three big question marks with legitimate potential and legitimate concerns. So it's just, first of all, who's even going to start? Trey Brown is hurt right now, and he still isn't fully recovered in the sense that he's not on the field yet. He's fully recovered from the injury, but he's doing rehab, I think is what Pete said. So like right off the bat, you've got Sidney Jones who had 6 really good weeks to end the season. But again, he's never had a full season where he's had a good season, right? To date. So,
and he's never had a full season where he's been healthy, right?
Right. So can that repeat? Artie Burns, literally same story, had a good 6 weeks in Chicago. Obviously, Sean Desai's guy. Is he going to play? Who knows? And then the 2 draft picks, Tariq Woolen, Matty. I know you've written about him and you'll lots of things. Obviously, just a project guy, but like lots of excitement. Kobe Bryant is kind of like the opposite. Comes out with a high floor, not as athletic, but really technically skilled and competitor and all that. He could be a dark horse to actually push for a starting spot. Like that's
he's been working on the right and the left apparently.
So, Matty, before you kind of get into your soliloquy and all these guys, whoever does end up starting will still get to see the depth because, again, they will be playing more cover one and they can just mix and match guys on specific receivers week to week. So I imagine we'll still get to see the depth guys.
There's a world where it's unlikely, but if Tariq Woolen's firstly with Woolen, like if he's not playing on special teams like each week, if he's a game day inactive, then that's a bit concerning because it suggests that the learning for him is not going well. He's not acclimatized to the NFL because he should be on special teams every week. Like he has the athletic traits to do that. Now, there's a world where he actually does really well, and to get him on the field, they start matching him up on tight ends because they're slower, and he'll find it easier, and then he can really use his length and his big body to match up with them. But then you could say the same about them using Blair as a tight end killer, in a similar vein to how they used Akeem King against Travis Kelce, where it was 2018 Sunday Night Football, I think, and it only was like 13 snaps, but it felt like a lot more. And Chris Collinsworth ended up like highlighting Akeem King for that reason because he was like doing really well against Kelce on passing downs, right? But I've spoke about Woolen and Kobe Bryant in the past on this podcast. I think there's definitely a world where Bryant is starting week 1, I think that's feasible because his floor, like if he's enough of an athlete and still stay in phase and not actually ever get burnt, which I never saw him get burnt on the college tape. Like he was always in phase and his speed wasn't an issue. Well, then if that carries over to the NFL still, then I think he's already technically polished enough and with an off season learning their techniques and stuff and their coverages, and he's already intelligent enough of a football player to really start pushing for reps in a similar way to how Trey Brown came in last year and was doing that until he got slightly dinged up, didn't he? Which limited his progress. Then he came back and impressed again. Now, the thing with Bryant is similar to Brown as well. But Brown got thrown out a ton because he's in the Big 12 and he was in some horrid little assignments, right? Not through bad coaching, but just because it's the Big 12. Now, same deal with Kobe Bryant. He got thrown out a ton because he's opposite Sauce Gardner, and he also played out into the field, so the wide side of the field. So a lot of space to cover in. So really, actually, the NFL in a perverse way will be slightly easier for him because he's going to be less coverage reps, so he can focus in on those more. And less targets specifically, but also just less space to cover in, and he'll get picked on less. So that's an interesting element, and someone I'd really be watching. Apparently, Mike Dugas told me that he was working on the left side with the twos, but then with the ones he's working on the right side. So he's going to be pushing Artie Burns. But also, if Sidney Jones goes down or Sidney Jones regresses, then left side ready. But Artie Burns kind of to me that reminds me of a similar deal to the Akello Witherspoon ad, where they add this long athletic type. But the good thing about Burns is they have actually had some familiarity with coaching him, whereas with Witherspoon, they hadn't had that. They clearly expected him to use a different technique to what he ended up using. They clearly thought they could change a dude who was already that dude, and they couldn't, and so they cut him. But Burns, I think, sticks on the roster because they know him. He's long, he's athletic, and he's working on the right side, which will be interesting. Kind of like last time we saw a guy that long on the right of the defense, Brandon Brown, and then it would have been I don't know. Anyway, been a while since we've seen that.
Simon, he was fairly long.
Yeah, Simon. Where did Carrie Williams play? Was he on the left? Yeah.
No, he was on the
right.
defense is right.
Maxwell. Byron Maxwell.
Oh yeah, Maxi. Yeah. How could I forget? Yeah. So anyway, nice to have a bit of length back. The different styles are going to be fun to watch. It's a fun thing to watch in the preseason again. I hope that camp does dictate who gets reps, but similar to a lot of these positions we spoke about, I hope we do see some real kind of competitive battles because, like Kobe Bryant, if everything goes according to plan, he should be pushing for playing time immediately. Trey Brown, I worry about coming off on a serious knee injury, but if we say he's all good, which I mean, Will Dissly had a similar deal, and he was never that explosive, but he's never looked like the same type of mover. So it's no joke, right? Especially for a corner. It's not like he's playing tight end where he can kind of vibe with that.
Right.
If he comes back, he should be pushing for immediate playing time. Artie Burns, like he'll be thinking, I can start here. And then Sidney Jones, he's probably the surest thing, but he's not that sure, is he? Because
no. And so Sidney's playing left, right? So if Trey comes back, I imagine Trey's pushing for the right side, and obviously, as you were saying, Trey was played on the left side when he did play.
Yeah.
So I don't like how does he handle? I know he played both sides in college, right? Or he found himself on both sides. So I don't know.
Trey Brown?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mainly left when he was doing real stuff, but yeah, both sides.
Yeah. So I don't know. It will be weird in that sense in terms of finding guys' best spot because obviously DJ Reed just seen better in general playing on the other side. So on the right side. So I don't know how that's going to shake out. But again, the consolation prize is this cover one package. They'll be able to at least get them on the field. Like that can be their excuse to see more guys. And then Matty, what do you think of Justin Coleman at slot?
I think I'd like to be wrong, but I think it's very, very, very difficult to once it's gone as that kind of classical slot corner. Once it's gone, right? In terms of the athleticism,
Yeah.
like we saw with Jeremy Lane, like the demands of having to cover these cats, the agile types we were speaking about earlier, but also the explosive types. In out in space, the extra space to the slot is so difficult that like I haven't watched Coleman recently, but like there's a reason he was available for,
Yeah.
like I think he might have gone. So we'll find out real fast.
And
It's unfortunate there was a rep post on Twitter of him getting burned, which we don't really know if it was his fault because it was a very tight angle.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what he can. But then, like, he could transition to the outside. But I
Maybe.
kind of I doubt
See,
it.
but
They tried it
you
with
could,
Lynn Stevens, right? And
yeah. The slot corner is kind of the schematic linchpin for them to be able to play cover one, though. Like that guy,
yeah,
like
you're
you
right.
you could argue last year they had the perimeter corners to play cover one between Trey and during when they had Trey and DJ, and then Sydney, who like all of a sudden just started playing really well as the season went on after a few rough patches to start. But the reason why they didn't was because their slot corner was Ugo Amadi, who we already spoke about. So, like, do they just want a threshold of play out of whoever that slot corner is so that they can? Now, could Kobe play in the slot? Maybe. If the more DBs you have, the more you can mix and match, right? The more you can this guy, he can be on this guy for this week, but none of them would be like you would with Justin Coleman or Jeremy Lane or Walter Thurmond, right? So I don't know. I feel like Justin Coleman is a lot actually rides on him, which is a weird thing to think about it.
John Reed has nickel experience.
Yeah.
Don't forget about him. And so does DJ Reed. Oh well.
Although he didn't seem that good in Nicolo,
No.
which is so weird. But
yeah. Anyway, that we'll find out about the defense, I guess.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Hope you enjoyed this. Please do like, subscribe, share, retweet. Anything else? Any other weird things you want to do? And we'll be back sooner than we were last time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Too right.